The Inner Light. Picard goes through an entire lifetime in 25 minutes.
The Enterprise encounters an unidentified probe which scans the ship.
It looks like a cool eraser that you would win at an elementary school fundraiser. The probe manages to penetrate their shields, and suddenly Picard gets knocked out. When he wakes up, he's in an unfamiliar place, in unfamiliar clothes, with an unfamiliar woman,
who addresses him as Cayman and says that he has just come out of a bad fever.
He tells the computer to end the program and attempts to contact the Enterprise, but nothing works.
He goes outside and finds that he is in a relatively primitive village.
And the people are in the process of commemorating a sapling in defiance of a long-lasting drought, even though there are kind of a bunch of plants all over the place.
A man named Bataille is in charge, who is played by Richard... who we saw before as Buffy's first Watcher.
Picard starts questioning him and receives the same answers about his illness, so he starts to play into it to figure out more about what's going on.
Bataille says the fever must have taken his memory and that the woman, Elene, is his wife.
The planet is not part of the Federation, so Picard takes a walk to get a better foothold on the situation.
And we get a cool shot of the town from a distance. Eventually, he goes back to his supposed home, where Elene acts like an idiot, apparently forgetting that he lost his memory.
She's lucky he could find his house. He learns that he's an iron worker, and apparently plays the flute.
She doesn't seem familiar with the concept of interstellar travel, and says they communicate with other communities via toucans and a string.
And he notices Elene's necklace, which matches the shape and design of the probe from the beginning.
Back on the Enterprise, we see that Riker is taking forever to get Picard to sickbay.
Beverly says there's no indication of injury, but Picard's brain activity is off the charts.
They say the probe is still affecting him, but when they try to move away, it follows.
And Worf just wants to blow it up, as usual.
Back in the community, Resic, Picard charts the course of the sun, and we find out that 5 years have passed.
He seems to have accepted his place within the community, but he can't fully let go of his memories of the Enterprise.
Bataille arrives and takes Picard to the tree, where a higher government official is visiting, and they discuss the drought.
Bataille asks for water help, which is dismissed as alarmist behavior because the administrator says the drought won't last much longer.
Picard suggests building atmospheric condensers to extract moisture from the air, but the official arrogantly dismisses it and says they'll be fine. And after he leaves, Bataille points out that Picard was speaking as a true member of the community.
Later, while playing Frère Jacques on his flute, he apologizes to Elene for being such a bad husband and tells her he wants to start a family.
Back on the Enterprise, Geordi and Riker determine that the probe is leaving a trail, and they can send out a probe of their own to track it back to its origin.
Data has also figured out a way to disrupt the beam, but Beverly doesn't want him to do it because it could harm Picard, but Riker says, "Be quiet, we're going to do it."
Back on Resic, more time has passed, and Picard is straight up showing off on the flute at a ceremony for their second kid, who they have named Bataille, after Picard's friend who has now died.
And we get another kid who cannot help but look right at the camera,
showing a sure future in show business.
But suddenly he collapses, and it turns out it's due to the Enterprise's meddling. Picard almost dies, but Data manages to re-establish the connection with the probe.
We cut back to Resic again, where an aged Picard talks to his now grown daughter Maribor. Maribor is played by Jennifer Nash, who I recognized from the movie Invisible, The Chronicles of Benjamin Knight, which is a total piece of shit.
That sounds made up. Might as well say I recognized her from the movie Disk Drive, The Optical Experience. They have decades of data proving that the planet is dying from the drought.
Picard encourages her to marry the guy she likes and make use of her time while she can, because the episode will be over soon.
And on the Enterprise, Geordi has managed to chart where the probe came from, which is an uncharted system, and Data says all life there was destroyed 1,000 years ago when their star went supernova.
On Resic, ancient Picard talks to Elene about their son Bataille, who is playing the flute now.
And he tells Picard that he's decided to leave school and become a musician.
Picard doesn't approve, but seems to understand his decision.
That doesn't matter. They're all going to die anyway. Who cares? Go be a pornographer. I don't give a shit. And the next day, he's talking to the administrator about the planet dying, who obviously did not have as good of a makeup artist for his aging.
And I thought it was interesting that he never got a name in this entire episode. The administrator admits they know what's going to happen to their planet, and they have some kind of plan.
Picard is throwing out all these technological things they could do, but the administrator says they've only begun perfecting the launching of small missiles.
Why didn't they just shoot a missile at the sun? Picard's son shows up to get him back home to see Elene, who is sick.
He lets her know that his findings were correct, and they share a heartfelt moment before she dies.
We skip ahead a few years to Crypt Keeper Picard playing with his grandson, and they mentioned using skin protection whenever they go outside.
The whole family is going to a missile launch ceremony, which Picard says he didn't hear anything about.
And he talks about how sad he is that his grandson won't have a chance to live a full life.
When they get to the town center, Picard asks more questions about the missile launch, and he suddenly sees Bataille, who tells him he's already seen the missile, and it turns out it's the probe from the beginning of the episode. The people of Resic launched it to keep the memory of their existence alive.
It was supposed to carry information about them to someone else who could relate their experiences.
Oh, it's me. Isn't it? I'm the someone.
Elene reappears as well and tells him to pass on what he has learned about them.
On the Enterprise, the probe shuts down and Picard wakes up, and despite going through a lifetime on Resic, Riker says he's only been out for 25 minutes, which was inaccurate because this episode was 45 minutes.
Later, Riker visits Picard and says they opened the probe and found something inside.
And then he leaves without saying another word, which was odd, but done for story purposes.
Well, I figured Picard had already explained everything that happened at that point.
Right, but I would have thought he would say, "Is that the flute that you were talking about?"
Ask him to join his trombone band or whatever.
I fake play my instrument all the time. You should join in. The Inner Light. Overall,
I thought this episode started out a little clumsy with the way the other characters reacted to Picard and Resic, and I was fully expecting the life going on in Picard's head to play out really tediously. But thankfully, the episode surprised me and turned out to be really good. Even toward the end, I was expecting everything to turn out to be a dream or something stupid like that, and I'm glad they didn't do that. The way they kept cutting back to the Enterprise really helped, because those scenes were just long enough to let you know what they were doing next, and the crew was actually doing things that made sense, so they didn't feel pointless, and they let you know that they aren't trying to make you think that Picard has really been this other character all along, because that would have been stupid too. The idea behind everything, of having Picard live an entire other life that he will carry with him going forward, was great, and even the explanation for why it happened was good. My only real issue is that the inhabitants of the planet didn't seem capable of developing whatever technology they used for the probe. If they were barely at the missile launching stage, how were they able to send a probe way out into space that can inject an entire lifetime of interactive experiences into someone else's head? That wasn't very plausible, but everything else worked so well that I'm still going up to an A. And I'm very surprised to hear myself say that.
Me too. I know when we watch episodes that are highly acclaimed, we usually go in...
Well, I'm going to say that I never know what a response is to an episode until I watch it. I don't look anything up. I didn't know what this episode was about or anything. And that's the case for almost all of them.
Well, I've seen the show before, and I just know...
Yeah.
I also gave this one an A. There was heavy emotion running through this one, which I usually am not a fan of because it asks us as the viewer to throw out all logic. But this one handled it very well. I liked Picard's skepticism at the beginning, and I also liked that we cut back to the Enterprise once in a while, and that those parts of the story actually contributed to the overall plot. We've had episodes in the past where something was happening outside of the ship, and they could have done stuff, but instead stood around talking about nothing, just to remind us that they're in the show too. I thought that probe was pretty aggressive. Just invading your mind and breaking contact would kill you. And they're lucky that it could interface with human brains, since apparently it only had one shot before self-destructing. And my biggest question was, how much knowledge did Picard retain from the Enterprise? Because he was playing Frere-Jacques on his flute. We've seen other crew members MacGyver items together from next to nothing when they're in a desperate situation, and I was wondering if Picard would have been able to make something futuristic to that community. I think this episode deserves its reputation, must-watch top 10 best episodes of Star Trek, and I'm very impressed that this two-part episode completely hid the fact that it's really a Romulan plot to get inside of his brain. I look forward to the next episode when it turns out it was them the whole time.